All right, then.
Oh, dear.
Let's try like this. Welcome, everybody, to the Flux Cast. This is number 1. We're very excited to bring this to you. And I am Matt Chalmers. I am one of the founders of Flux Pharma Services. And with me today is...
Brianna Porter, the other founder of Flux Pharma Services. How is everybody?
Hey. So I want to start with, not on today's topic. I want to start with what we were just talking about before, about the Craig Kelly news
Saga.
of the day. Now there's 2 reasons why I want to talk about this first. Number 1 is that Craig Kelly is my local member. I think he might be yours too, right?
I think so.
And I imagine that he won't be our local member for much longer. We're really going to find out what the caliber of our neighbours are in the next election, if he gets in and get on moving.
Brought out the true colours in the community, hasn't it?
So I want to talk about that for that reason, but also too, I do have a friend who has been treating patients with this overseas in a bitterly poor third world country, and I have talked to her about possibly doing a Flux Cast on her experience with the ivermectin, and I think that it would be interesting. I mean, she's in a country that doesn't have, there's no monoclonal antibodies. There's, medicines are always in shortage there. No, not at all. They don't have anything that's going on. I mean, the vaccines are making their way through, but they're certainly not, at the rates that we are here. So I'm going to look at bringing her on to just talk about her experience. No judgment on whether this is the right treatment, wrong treatment, or anything like that. But I think it is a very interesting experience. But let's talk about Craig Kelly.
Yes.
What were you saying before? He's been
the TGA has got him. They're very clearly not happy with him. He's actually been mass messaging people, and I know I've been receiving the messages as well, and there's no way to opt out of them. I, in desperation, sent a text message back saying, please don't send me anything, because they don't have a, send stop to this message to, opt out. Yeah. But they've been sending out this mass message with a link to adverse events for the vaccinations. And it's actually just an excerpt, and you look at the little address, and it has like a TGA in there, so it kind of looks like it's come from the TGA, which is super dodgy. And I'm trying to see if I can find my message, but anyway, it's this address, and it takes you to basically a screenshot of adverse events relating to the COVID-19 vaccinations. So the TGA, they manage all the adverse events, and it's so closely reported on with the COVID-19 vaccinations. We hear about every time somebody farts after having this vaccination at the moment, because it's such a topical thing. But Craig Kelly has taken the excerpt out of the adverse events register. He's taken an incomplete excerpt, so just taking out the information that serves his purposes, and just mass messaged people. Now, he's not a health professional. He's not somebody that should be giving advice. So he hasn't technically given advice. He hasn't said in the message, don't get the vaccination, it's going to kill you. He hasn't said anything in particular. He's just sent out the adverse events. So I guess the TGA has kind of been tied up that they can't get him for spreading information against vaccination. He's not outright saying don't get vaccinated in these messages. But what he has done is he's taken out the copyright statement from the bottom of the page. And guess what they got him on?
You would think that he would want to leave that in.
Oh, you'd think so. Make it more legit.
Just to show. Well, I think it would give it more validity, wouldn't it? Like, this is actually from the TGA.
Maybe they couldn't have the copyright on there when they cut out the particular pieces that they wanted. Because if you look at this document, it looks like it's come from the TGA. Like, it's got the header. It's very official. But yes, they've taken off the copyright statement. So the lawyers from the TGA are going after him for copyright infringement.
Great. Well, you know what? We might just keep an eye on that one, because that sounds really fun. And we can either we can call him Craig Kelly, or we can call him far less successful Australian Donald Trump. I don't care. All right. Look, today we want to talk about medicine shortage
Yes.
here in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess is always been on the mind of compounders for sure.
Yeah, exactly right. It's
But
always been an issue in Australia.
yeah, and none more so than now. In a world where everything is in shortage at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you try and buy a new car, too bad. Everything's gone up by 10 grand,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not 10 grand better. They're just 10 grand now.
That's it, exactly right. You can actually get it.
Yeah. So, this medicine shortage thing has been around for a long time. I know that we used to look at it in some of the businesses I worked in, but what are your thoughts? What are your opening thoughts there?
Look, as I said, it's always been an issue in Australia, where the small country that doesn't get a lot of things that other countries get purely because we're small. There's things that to register a product here, the TGA charges so much money, and it takes such a long time to register things in Australia that we actually miss out on a lot. But the whole COVID-19 situation has really highlighted the shortages and what we don't have. And there's heaps of options for getting medicines, but whether they're a good option or not, I'm not sure. There's obviously, they're not ideal situations. It's just a way of getting some sort of treatment to people, but there's a lot of risks associated with the different options that are given. It's not something that you just go, oh, yep, I'll just give them a different drug or a different dose, or there's a lot of implications that come along with it that people don't necessarily think about.
I did look up briefly the numbers on this. So, at the moment, as it stands, we're approximately 2% of the global market for medicines in Australia, in the world.
Yeah, right.
The currently imports are 90% of our medicines. So we've got to import.
There's not a lot made here.
Nearly all of it, and that's a huge level of exposure.
Yeah, especially
when you
haven't got planes coming in, you haven't got ships coming in, and the ones that are coming, they're so far delayed. So it makes a big difference. When you're a big island in the middle of nowhere, it makes a big difference to your medicine supply.
Yep. And look, and to one last little number that I did. I mean, currently today we are 0.003% of the world population. Actually, what do you think about that? 0.003% of the world population, but we do account for 2% of the medicines.
We must take a lot of medicines.
We take a lot of medicine here.
That's a big difference, really.
It's huge, huh?
Like, in numbers of, because there's how many billion people in the world?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's over 7 now.
Yeah, wow. That's a really interesting stat. I like that one.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what though. Here's the thing: is that's either we're taking too much medicine, or things are bad for
everybody else.
So many people, Which I mean, I guess
I guess a big chunk of that would be a big chunk of the population would be in countries like India and China where they wouldn't have access.
Yeah.
So I think that would probably skew the percentages quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That's cool.
Okay. So how much of this do you think is linked to COVID?
There's a lot of things, especially like that serious shortages list. There's a few things that have been on there for years. It's not necessarily something that's just happened because of COVID. It's, things like the Estradot, for example. How long's that been out of stock?
Yeah. Well...
Metformin's been years. I was at Fagron still when that was out of stock.
Yeah, there is a reason the Estradot's out of. I mean, you and I both know that there's one clinic in particular that takes up all the estrogen in Australia and gives that out to patients.
For estrogen.
Yeah, and they still don't have enough to meet demand.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I know the one that we were talking about before was really interesting though, with the sertraline shortage.
What a wild time to be out of antidepressants.
I know, right? Jeez. But is it because of the time we're in that we're out of antidepressants? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know. Are people up in their use, or more people going on it?
Well, they're calling it the shadow pandemic now, aren't they? Depression and anxiety and everything around the pandemic. People can't go anywhere, they can't see people, and so there's definitely been an increase in depression and anxiety as a result. But yeah,
that's really worrying. I
it
don't like
is
that. I don't like that. That's
not available to those people that really
yeah,
need it.
yeah.
Because what was the option they gave you? Was to give a different dose, was it? A different strength of the product?
Is that what the advice is? The TGA advice?
That's the TGA advice. So the details of the medicine to be supplied. So this is under the serious shortages substitution notice, which is basically when a medicine's out of stock and a pharmacist can substitute the medicine without the person having to go back to their doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So the pharmacist can straight up say, okay, I haven't got this strength in stock, but I have, the half strength or the double strength in stock, and you just need to take a different dose. Now, if you've got somebody that's been on a product for quite some time, and, sertraline patients probably have been, they're probably used to taking the same dose. And if you're offering them an alternative strength, so they'll be taking a different number of tablets, they might be doing a half or double, you really run the risk of them overdosing or underdosing, and it can cause some issues if you are just supplying an alternative strength.
Yeah, I'm really like that. That really does concern me. And you know what I find interesting is that, like a couple of years ago when they changed the rules about what can be compounded, it used to be that if there was a commercially available product but you required a different strength, you could go ahead with that and compound. And now they say that if there's a product with the same therapeutic outcome, then you must use that.
Yeah, that requirement.
We must be seeing some crossover there.
Smaller.
Yeah, we must be seeing some crossover there with that, and shortages too. I mean, by logic.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think.
Yeah. So then it's. So then, if your sertraline dose is out of stock, that's it. You can't go and get it compounded at your dose.
No, exactly,
because there is a product with a similar therapeutic outcome.
They basically have prioritized the availability of a mass manufactured product, something, and I can understand the reasoning on that because commercially available products do have end testing on every batch.
Yeah.
But there are other considerations around safety, not just the manufacturing risks. There are so many things with compliance and dosing and the clinical aspects of it, which create risks as well. So it's whether the commercially available product is suitable or not. There's so much variability into what you could sort of determine as suitable, really.
Mm.
And, pharmacists are kind of at the mercy of the interpretation of the regulator. So it depends on who walks into their store to do the inspection that day as to whether it's suitable or not, really.
Yeah, wow.
That's
rough, huh? Because what if they had just had a bad day? What if someone cut them off as they were coming into your car park?
They've spilt coffee down their front. They've just had enough of the day. And that's what can happen. We're really open with the guidelines and professional practice standards and things that are out there. Like even the Pharmacy Council, for example, in New South Wales, they had a checklist that they provided for compounders. There was a guidance on, I think it was the guidance on equipment and premises that they released with a checklist and, went through different documentation you needed, different training, all that sort of stuff. They've removed that list from their website. They no longer use that list now because they had compounders using it as an exhaustive list. So that was not how they designed it. They said, this was a guidance document. It wasn't this is the exact list you must follow, but people were using it as such. And in saying that, it was very specific. Like it wasn't a guidance per se. It was like, you had to have 9 meters square minimum. No other council has said that. So, that's just an example of interpretation is so varied. And if you're dealing with a medicines shortage, you've got to make a call as to what the suitable option is. And you've got all these options. You've got the substitution, which are only available for certain products. You've got your SAS option, so getting a product that's not approved by the TGA. So how is that better than a compounded product? it's from an overseas source that hasn't been approved. You've got, there is also a Schedule 19 option, which is basically products which are going through approvals with the TGA. So the TGA may actually grant access to medicines which are partway through the approval process. So they haven't even approved them yet. And they can give access to people that way as well. So, I think when you've got these things that aren't assessed by the TGA, how are they different from compounding, really? None of them have been assessed. And that's the issue that the TGA takes with compounding, is that it's not assessed for safety, quality, and efficacy. So, it's obviously medicine shortages, if I can talk properly, they're not an ideal situation, but the solutions really aren't ideal situations either.
So let's talk withdrawals from the market.
Yes.
I mean, we're we just covered it before. We're 2% of the global market.
Yep.
We have 0.003% of the population. It costs $2 million to put a product on the ARTG.
Yep.
We're seeing withdrawals all the time.
Yeah, because if you look at a drug company's potential for making money, basically, a lot of the time, if they're putting it into the Australian population, they might have a drug that is for 3% of the population, say. So we've got 25 million people. 3% of 25 million people is not that many people. When they're spending $2 million to have the drug registered, that's not the cost of goods for the product. That's not the shipping it to Australia, which is in itself expensive. That's not dealing with customs regulations, all that kind of crap that we have to go through. That's just, we have a situation here where we aren't an ideal country for these drug companies. They could send the same product over to the US, where they've got 3% of 400 million people.
Yeah.
Which they're going to make their money back in no time. Yeah.
I remember we used to make a product at the last place, and there was twins that had it was some sort of degenerative disorder, and there was a specific product that was made for it, and they were 2 of 3 children in Australia that had this disorder. And look, they were very lucky because they had a relative that was very, very well off.
Yeah, right.
And so we were able to cut a deal with the manufacturer. I mean, the drug was still under patent. We were able to cut a deal with the manufacturer, and they were able to send the material over, the raw material over, the API,
so that they could the actual raw material as well.
Yeah. And so they sent it over, and we were able to compound it for these kids because they were lucky. They had this wealthy relative, but that they weren't as lucky as the third kid, because the wealthy relative said, you know what, throw him in as well.
Oh, can you imagine that? Like, you've got this kid that you go, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford this medicine, and some wealthy stranger. Like, that's movie stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he was lucky. But that was what we had to resort to, because there was this disorder for which they have a registered product overseas, because the market's big enough. But here in Australia, we had three kids.
Far out.
Yeah.
It's hard, and you see people trying to access that kind of medication, and it does cost a lot of money. Like, even if you do go through SAS, some of it is claimable on PBS, but not all of it. So, it does increase the cost. I know a girl that's got cystic fibrosis, and she was looking at a medication which could be imported under SAS, but it was going to cost her, I think it was $10,000 a month for this medication for cystic fibrosis. Like, what normal person can afford that? It's ongoing. Yeah. It's not like it's a once-off and then you're good. $10,000 a month ongoing.
Mm.
Like, that's not, you might be able to physically access it, but financially being able to access is a whole different thing.
Oh, wow.
So it's, being able to get those medicines. And look, there are things that get withdrawn from the market because they're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the reality of it. Some things they do find years down the track, they find problems with it. That's why we have certain processes in place in manufacturing and drug companies, all that sort of thing, to manage that kind of situation. But more often than not in Australia, we do struggle with the commercial interests of big pharma.
I just want to take a moment and tell you about Flux Pharma Services. Flux is a new company providing knowledge to compounding pharmacists for implementing their own quality management systems. Each month, we cover a topic in depth with a series of videos and information via our online learning platform. It's designed to be taken at your own pace, and each module in our quality stream is accredited for CPD. Our monthly membership fee is charged to the pharmacy, meaning every pharmacist working in the member location can take our course and earn their full complement of compounding CPD at no extra cost. To join and begin your journey toward better quality management, visit fluxpharma.com.au. Now, where were we? So that's interesting. I mean, if something's withdrawn for safety reasons, I mean, what stops people from compounding it?
Well,
where do you look? Where do you look? I mean, there must be a way. They don't just go, well, we'll throw that to the pharmacies now. Like there has to be something that stops you from compounding. But I don't know of any cannot be made list.
No, we don't. We have a schedule. Well, I know in New South Wales anyway, there is the Schedule 9 poisons, which are poisons. So those are ones that are banned from being used.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the time, things that do get removed, like it could be because of diversion or addiction. So it's not technically a poison. It's not going to kill people in that respect. But there may be things that that the sponsor is concerned about, so they will remove it. What am I? Lost my train of thought. But yeah, so there
I'm just okay. So that look, that covers New South Wales, right?
That's it.
I mean, if you're in Queensland or WA or something like that, I mean, how do you know? How do you know that's happening?
The TJ also does manage poisons through the SUS map and importation of medicinal products. So if there's a particular product that's being imported, you need to, if there's safety concerns about the product, there will be special permits and licenses that you need to maintain in order to import those products. And more often than not, you do have to disclose what the end user is.
Yeah, right, okay.
So S4D medicines, for example, so testosterone, DHEA, that kind of stuff.
So if a pharmacy is importing directly, are they have to provide an end user for as the patient, right? What about if a wholesaler is importing? Do they make the pharmacy the end user?
So the wholesaler actually has to get an end user declaration from the pharmacy.
Yeah, right.
So which is hard when you're trying to bring in stock. So, I know we used to we'd have stock of particular products, which were all kept under lock and key and everything like that according to the state regulations. But trying to get it in the first place, I'm trying to think. There was one that I want to say naltrexone, I think it was. We actually had to collect end user forms every time we sold a product.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get stock, we would have to provide the end user forms for the last lot that we received.
Oh, right.
So there's so much paperwork when it comes to import. Like, I know whenever pharmacies say to me, well, why don't I just bring it in myself? I'm like, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's a nightmare. You've got to know where even to the point where you've got to know the source origin of chemicals. If it comes from a particular source, you might have to get a permit from the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. If it's a particular schedule, you have to get a particular permit. Some things you need a license, then a permit. Some things just require a permit. Some things just require a license. It's so confusing and it's so ambiguous. But there's definitely ones that go through the system and don't get picked up. I know I read it in the AJP, I think, the other day about a pharmacy that just imported directly, I think it was DHEA, and just brought it in. So, because like countries like America, DHEA is not scheduled over there. You can buy that. You can buy that over the counter.
Yeah.
So, these US manufacturers, or even China, China will just send whatever they want, whenever they want, if you're getting a dodgy supply. But, the US, they will send DHEA, no questions asked. To them, it's just business as usual.
Yeah.
But on our end, it's a lot more regulated. So, we need permits for that here. And that's something that, the patients as well with direct importation for personal use as well, with companies like iHerb that's a classic. You can buy things like DHEA, melatonin, all of that on iHerb and get it sent direct to your house.
Yeah.
But people don't realise that you're still held under the same customs and import regulations as the wholesalers are, as the pharmacists are. So, you get in big trouble for importing DHEA without a license. That's big fines.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean that's a special consideration. Well, I mean it does link back to the medicine shortage. I mean if you've got a compounding pharmacy that's not far from a group of specialists and they require a particular thing, then it may be tempting to bring in a medicine that's in shortage, a raw material for a medicine that's in shortage.
100%. And I've heard people time and time again say, well, why don't I just bring it in myself? But there's so many considerations around it. And that's why not everybody just imports their own materials. If it was that simple, why would we have a wholesaler in Australia anyway?
Yeah. So I would imagine that there's wholesalers out there that would be willing to work with you on that sort of thing, though.
Definitely.
Yeah, because they've got half of the stuff in place already.
Exactly right. They've got the permits, they've got the licenses, so they have the capability to bring those things in for you.
Yeah.
Depending on what sort of quantities you're after, that obviously would make a difference, especially if it's something that these wholesalers don't usually bring in. They might ask for minimums, that kind of thing. But I guess it just depends on the product, the wholesaler, the pharmacy, as to what's feasible, really. But if you need to bring something in direct, talk to somebody else. Even customs brokers are really useful as well. You've got to find somebody who does have experience with the import of medicines, though. I know I've dealt with customs brokers in the past who just don't have a clue about medicines. And that's a real pain in the backside. Because you're then having to explain the medicine side of things and the poisons lists and the scheduling to these people who then do the imports processes for you. So, lots involved for actually bringing in. So, the option from the TGA for SAS or for personal importation scheme, it would be an absolute pain to do. Like, you would have to be desperate, like completely. I would say that would be your last resort,
right?
Trying to get that in. But at the same time, should the actual medication you need be your last resort, or the different dose or different drug to what you've been taking be the last resort? They've both, I don't know, hard to make a call, isn't it?
What about, let's go to one of your big areas, something that you love. Right.
What are you saying that I love and everybody else finds boring? Or?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Cool. That's what I want to talk about now. That's what I want to talk about, because I'm going to go and make myself a coffee while I let you ramble on about this. Anyway.
I'll remember this.
I want to talk about the documentation.
Yes.
For this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about documentation and you've got or everything that needs to go with every compounding instance, I would imagine that there's something that's involved with the making of a medicine that's in shortage.
Definitely.
Is that something, where would you cover that in documentation?
You definitely have to do your risk assessment. in great detail. I would look at every option, record where you've searched for alternatives, who you've spoken to. Everything needs to be written down, because basically if it's not written down, it never happened. How do you prove that something happened if you don't have a record of it? With the substitutions and things like that, making sure that you record that you've explained it to the patient, but also that you've discussed with the prescriber as well, where you can. But with compounding, you need to make sure that I would be recording the date that you've searched for the product. If you've got any statements from suppliers about out of stocks, even, would be really useful to have in your compounding record. Any statements from the TGA, for example. So a copy of the, with the copyright intact. Don't do a Craig Kelly.
No Craig Kellying.
No Craig Kellying. But maybe like the excerpt from the drug shortages register, just with an example, or not an example, with the line of what is out of stock. Mm. So building your evidence, making sure you've got record that you have, that you've done everything you can to provide a commercial product. And that's what the regulators are looking for, because to the regulators, compounding is something that just fills a gap. It's not something that you should be doing instead of. It should be, there is no other option. I have searched all my options. This is what it's going to be. And then I've compounded it because this is my only option. And that's the way you got to think when you're collecting up your data. You want to make sure that you're also include any safety data or stability data that you might find around that product as well. So, making sure that compounding it is still safe, that it's not out of stock because of safety concerns. Definitely a good part of the risk assessment to just check, make sure that the product hasn't been, slammed on every regulator's list in the world. Right. Sometimes the TGA takes a little bit to catch up, but if just make sure that it's not on watch lists or anything like that before you go ahead. So, but keeping all of that together with your compounding record would be the way to go.
Okay. Wow, that was a lot shorter than I thought it would be. I thought we were just going to lose you there. I thought you were going to black out and then snap to it and go, wait, was it?
I'll be here and it'll be dark around
me. Oh, my goodness. 2 hours has passed. Well, if you want to hear Bri talk about that for an hour, then you can join Flux Pharma Services and you will be able to see. That's our first cab off the rank.
Yes.
Volume 1 is all about documentation, and you'll be able to join and hear Bri talk about that in great detail. All right. How do you keep on top of it? I know that when I used to examine this list in detail, I would get a daily update. I would get a daily update from the TGA that said what was currently in shortage. And back then it was okay. That has changed in the last couple of years, because now they've actually said, listen, you have to put, when a medicine's in shortage, you have to put it up there. Before it was kind of voluntary, and so you wouldn't see as many. Yeah, it was kind of voluntary of pharmaceutical companies to sort of go, all right, we'll let them know now.
You'd hear it from pharmacists before you heard it from the TGA before, You get, I know we would start getting phone calls for a particular raw ingredient over and over and over and over and over, and you go, oh, hang on a second, there's a shortage. And then, a few weeks later, you get a message from the TGA going, hey, guess what? It's in shortage.
Yeah, well, now they've got to report it. So, yeah, I don't know. Are you still able to get onto the?
You can still subscribe. I think you can subscribe to the database and get notifications of out of stock medicines for sure.
When you look at it, you can actually you can go onto the site, the TGA site, and see what the current shortages are. Actually have this, they've got it split up now: current, anticipated, resolved, and discontinuations. That's pretty useful.
Yeah, so you can see
That's
what's
pretty
going to be.
useful.
Because a lot of the time you would have things that were out of stock and they'd be out of stock, and then all of a sudden it was just, oh, well, it's never coming back into stock.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's nice that they've separated it out to discontinuations.
Yes. So look, as I look at it today, pull back the curtain a little bit. It's the 16th of September. So as I look at it today, we've got 7 anticipated shortages on there. There's 13 discontinuations that are listed.
What are the anticipated? I'm curious.
Let's see.
Is it to do with?
You're going to make me read all these drug names now. You sound like a fool.
Yes, that's going to be the new segment. Is Matt reading drug names?
This one here is tenecteplase, sodium iodide. There's a couple of those listed there. Acetylcysteine. We'll come back to that one.
Too many syllables in that one, huh?
Voriconazole. Let's see. Epirubicin hydrochloride.
I'm impressed.
So, yeah. There you go. I didn't stumble on that. We could do that every week if you like.
Everybody send in your suggestions for long drug names.
Yeah, okay. Interestingly, they're discontinuing HCG.
They're discontinuing. Interesting.
Yeah. The 1500 IU and the 5000 IU.
Does it say why?
No. No, it just says deletion from market, 31st of October of August.
So
wow.
It's a manufacturer withdrawal.
Yeah. Anyway, look, that's I think that's worth looking at. At least keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if you're a compounder if you're a compounder that is servicing a lot of like specialists and things like that. Mm-hmm. I really think that's something that's worth keeping an eye on.
And I definitely think it's for our compounding only guys, especially to keep an eye on this list, because you don't have the ability to observe these changes in the market. Our guys that have got the hybrid compounding and they've got a dispensary where they do have commercial products, they'll probably observe these kind of problems earlier.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're compounding only, especially, I'd subscribe to that list for sure.
Yeah. Right.
Definitely. Very cool.
All right.
Is
there anything else you want to say about medicine shortages?
There's lots of things I want to say about medicine shortages, but we've only got a set amount of time, really. So.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks, Bri.
Thank you very much, Matt. Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye everyone.